All you homeowners have unique needs. Some feel the need to paint their door a vibrant shade of blue. Others have the need to decorate their bathroom with fish, anchors, and other nautical items. And because each homeowner has unique needs, Geico helps you get the right coverage for your home and what's in it. That way, you get exactly what's right for you, even if your needs are unique. Get more with Geico.
Welcome to the Trish and Sarah Wrestling Podcast. I'm Sarah.
I'm Trish.
And this is our podcast. We talk about wrestling news and various topics from different promotions, primarily AEW, but also New Japan Pro Wrestling, WWE, and topics from around the wrestling world. Whatever we find interesting, and we hope you will too. We are a proud member of the Social Suplex Podcast Network, and you can find our content on our podcast feed, the Social Suplex Podcast feed, as well as on Twitter and YouTube. Please feel free to like, subscribe, and rate our podcast. We also have a store at Shop Tees, so if you would like to support us or just own a really quality piece of merch, please take a look at shop-tees.com/collections/Social Suplex Network. Today is Sunday, March 2nd, 2025, and we're going to kick the show off today with the Hoarder's Garage to our Marie Kondo, the WWE Elimination Chamber, and the booking mess or opportunities that have come from that show last night, which took place on Saturday night, March 1st at the Rogers Center in Toronto. Last night's show was a 4-match program that ended with a big angle in which, and we will be discussing spoilers for this, so if you have not watched and you do care, and it is Tuesday, so you should have, don't listen to us. But anyway, John Cena finally turned heel and aligned with The Rock against Cody Rhodes. The Rock, Cena, and rap star Travis Scott had a beatdown of Cody at the end of the show and left him lying in blood while Cena stood triumphant with the WWE belt. So this is an interesting development, as I think we all knew from pretty much the beginning that the WrestleMania match was going to be Cody versus Cena, but the heel turn is a surprising development in what has been a roller coaster of a Mania season so far. Both somehow boring in kayfabe and yet also fascinating with the backstage stuff. Trish, were you shocked to hear that John Cena has turned heel?
Shocked is a weird word, because I always thought it could be a possibility. And especially as he's got older. So when he was much younger and in WWE full time, the answer was always that he does the Make-A-Wish things.
Oh, yes.
And in terms of, he was the main babyface. They needed him for merchandise sales. They needed him for ticket sales. He was, critical to all these things. They kept trying to make replacement babyfaces, or not trying, as the case may be. Depending on who you believe. And it just meant that so much was built around him as a top babyface that they were unwilling to turn him heel, even when he felt completely stale in that role. And now you kind of have this situation where he's gone away, he does films, he comes back, he's treated with a kind of nostalgia pop of, this was a guy that we recognize from our childhood or growing up, and rather than kind of, this was a guy who we loathed for many reasons for a lot part of the audience. And now it's when he goes in his final year as well. So I think it's a really interesting one, because it is going to get a lot of attention.
Yes.
With Cena and The Rock involved, and with Cody, who is their top babyface in WWE. But I think it's interesting. I see so many comparisons. So the two comparisons everybody seems to want to make is to Bash at the Beach with Hulk Hogan, and to the Steve Austin turn in 2001. And I'm not sure that this compares to either of them, because when you look at Bash at the Beach, that was kind of where Hogan was kind of at his weakest as a babyface. It was played out, it was done. There was just, there was no draw to him as a babyface. And, that's more similar to where Cena was in some ways in the mid-2010s, where it was kind of worn out. Like, the crowd were desperate to see something different. And then with Austin, it was like, they didn't want to boo him.
No.
Right? They didn't want to boo him. And they made a decision to turn him in Texas, and, it never worked. And the longer that they persisted with it, the harder it got for them. And, for a lot of people, that was part of their significant downturn going in from 2001 to 2002. So, but I don't think it's either of them. I wonder if it's closer to what happened with Roman Reigns, where they persistently kind of forced it for so long, and then they finally given people kind of what they wanted, or what they now perceive that they wanted, and that will make the audience more accepting of them. The other thing with this as well is that I think, so from my perspective personally, Cody being the heel in this program would always be kind of the wrong way around. You always want the older guy to be the heel if you're going to do something like this. And this gives them the opportunity to do that. I think that's healthier than some sort of, face kind of work shoot stuff. And we got a question from Daniel that was around exactly that would it be a mistake for a medium to long term program between Cena and Cody, considering that Cody would have to work heelish? Well, now we've got the opposite. So we've got defined roles, which I think is so important.
Yes.
And
yes.
You've got that with, you're presenting Cody as a babyface. So Cody's in an interesting position because he has been a champion for nearly a year now.
Yep.
And, you start to struggle after a period of time. It's much more, you're much more vulnerable when you're kind of there and you've had that belt for a long period of time than you are when you're hot, when you're on your ascendancy, when you're that chasing babyface. So this could kind of re-put that kind of energy into him, in terms of feeling like more of a kind of vulnerable protagonist in a way that he hasn't done for quite some period of time now. But it also, one of the other things it also does, and I know you've mentioned this previously when we discussed it, is it makes them look like there was a plan all along.
Yes. I mean, this is the big one, right? So I think what I was sort of interested in when I woke up this morning, because I did not watch Elimination Chamber, and I was sort of curious as to how this was going to end up. And I was like, Cena, interesting. And I was surprised at how happy most of the fans seem to be. Like, the reaction pretty much across the board seems to be positive. I think there are a few people poking holes, but they don't seem to be regular WWE watchers. Like, most of the people I see that like WWE are happy with this. And from their perspective, the feedback almost seems to be that this is like an exciting, unexpected thing that has happened in what has so far seemed to be a relatively boring build to WrestleMania, right? And I think, I think it kind of speaks to a bigger, more interesting thing about the last 2 years, right? So the last 2 years on the road to WrestleMania, you've had Rock show up and basically toss a bomb into all the plans. And that's been, it was leaked that was the case last year after the fact, and it's been leaked pretty much since before he possibly showed up. The whole time, it's like Rock could show up and fuck everything up. If you love Triple H, you should hate The Rock. Like, that's been the subtext of a lot of articles and other stuff that we've talked about for weeks on here, right? Yeah. But what's fascinating to me is, people loved Mania last year. Like, that whole thing was something people were crazy about. There were people who've talked about the Rock final boss character being like the villain of the year, was stuff that I saw people suggesting. So, and now it's like, this thing is so fascinating, so exciting, makes the whole situation so much better. So is Rock messing with Triple H's booking, or is he kind of saving it, like, in a way? Like, I sort of question whether or not, like, have I been thinking about this the wrong way in thinking that Rock is messing this shit up? I think what you could say about Triple H as a booker is that he is fairly dependable, right? Mm-hmm. Fairly straightforward, fairly, like, his stories progress, the things that are supposed to happen. Like, he doesn't tend to fuck too much shit up. I think the biggest complaint is that a lot of the stuff is sort of like, hey, so a faction member might be turning, like,
in 2 years.
And, like, the stories. Yeah, and I was just about to say, or the shit drags out too long, right? Like, that's the stuff you say about him. So by The Rock coming in and doing this shit, it forces Triple H to, like, think on his feet and, like, kind of throw some of those, like, the swerve type shit that, like, not Swerve Strickland, but, like, the change stuff that wrestling fans fucking love, right? When, like, shit like that they can't see coming. That was the big thing this morning that I saw. So I don't know that I fully believe this. I'm not sure that I'm wedded to my own thought, but it was something that kind of made me question today. Like, is Rock, by bringing this chaos, forcing Triple H to be a better booker?
It's a nuanced answer. So yes and no, yeah. There's a thing about...
I don't agree with it either.
No, there's a thing about chaos. And chaos in the short term can be really beneficial. And if you get something hot off that chaos, then it can carry you. So for something like Cody, and with this thing with Cena, it is really dependent on what happens next.
Yes.
So we've now got a scenario where Cena isn't scheduled to be around for the next 2 weeks.
Right.
Before the 3 days in Europe.
Right.
We've got a scenario where The Rock is out already and isn't expected back until April. And we don't even know if he's doing anything on WrestleMania. So the two main antagonists aren't going to be around in the immediacy.
Right.
Obviously, I don't think Cody should be off TV this week, being that he was, beaten down at the end angle.
But that's their biggest angle coming out of last night's show. And there's a possibility that there's nothing about it on, like, the main characters for that angle are not on Raw tomorrow night. Like, does that hurt them? Or I think yes, but part of me, like, I feel like my basic wisdom, conventional wisdom of how I would handle all this shit goes out the window, because the stuff that I'm like, that's nuts, the WWE fans seem to be like, yeah, woo, like.
Well, it works both ways, because you look at the way they've looked at it is that when they've done everything with Roman in the last few years, when he comes in, he pops numbers. Right? And the reason why The Rock has so much power still is that when he comes in, he can pop numbers in a way that other can't. It's not just like, I pop a quarter hour here or there when I'm protected. No, the quarter hours are combined with this raises this episode up in a way that other people can't. That's where his power holds. Right. But there are two sides to this. So this relies on Cena being focused on getting Cody Rhodes over. Right. So as soon as you start burying into the work shoot stuff, as soon as you start kind of making jokes, as soon as if Cena tries to get himself over, very similar to what happened to Cena by the hands of Triple H, ironically, back in the bill for WrestleMania 22. So if Cena has the equivalent lines to pumping up my Reeboks, you could scar Cody for the rest of his career potentially as a babyface in the way that Cena was, and he does have liabilities. We know this with Cody. You can look at him last week when he had that promo with The Rock, and you see him there, and you can see him as a politician, and they make out that you were Aries' friend as well, and all these things. I think that's a dangerous thing. The more that you show somebody's weaknesses in terms of the character and everything like that, the more danger there is to it. There's other dangers with that too, is that you're doing some things that in this kind of chaos theory that can be really damaging. So, we got another question from Drew on how do you think the Cena heel turn will impact WWE in the long term, if at all? And do you think it's the best move they could take him right now for the Mania bill, seeing that it's not seen as strong this year? For this quarter, and especially when we're seeing a stabilization of Netflix numbers at a lower rate than many expected, in the short term, it's successful. I imagine it will be successful for ticket sales as well. Cena has always moved tickets. That's his strong point. Yep. So when he comes involved, that will be. But in the long term, you can do significant damage to Cody. You're also portraying the company as secondary in a way that you have not done so in years. Right. So you're now saying that there's something above WWE. Yes. Being WWE champion isn't the top of the food chain, in a sense. It's been the kind of message for the last 2 weeks. And then we're also doing this thing where we basically acknowledge the power struggle. We're presenting these two versions. So there's been this huge effort, if you think about it, in the last few years, to have the Paul Levesque era. This is WWE. Being a WWE champion is the top thing that you can do in this industry, and now you've put something above it. You're making yourself secondary by having this thing with The Rock and TKO being above WWE. So that's kind of a long-term danger as well. Probably the biggest danger is, outside of just like the Cody thing, is that you're falling into all those things that you see when you're trying to sustain business or trying to spike it to keep like something going. Is that you abandon all those things that you did to reach kind of the top or to create that kind of uplift. So this will mean that we pretty much stop seeing elevation from anyone else under the card. That's a big question to me, right? Because I think that's like, who's underneath Cody, right? You've got a lot of these guys, part-timers coming back, and nobody else seems as important. And you could see this last night, right? Again, there was people in the beginning was McIntyre and Seth and Priest, and the crowd was chanting for everybody else. Yep. Right. So these are the guys that are going to be on TV, right? That's the part where you sort of question, are they building up somebody else to take over after Mania season is done and these guys, or after Cena's retirement's over with and these guys fuck off? Yeah. And that you end up having to look for something else to kind of spur things next year. But you very much have very similar to what happened in AEW in 2022.
Yeah.
And what happened, you can look at in WWE, and as I mentioned earlier, in 2001, that's kind of a prime area to look at. And you've got the same things bleeding in. So you've got these work shoots bleeding in everywhere. So you keep telling things that things aren't real, that there's a different reality that means more. You're telling it these characters are real, these kind of are. It's a dangerous line to get to. All these kind of structured stories that built up over time, you're abandoning them. There's no bloodline. The bloodline has faded away quite considerably. Yeah. The characters like Sammy and that sort of thing, they are moved back down below. Where can that ascendancy go to? You can't see anything for the foreseeable future now because this is the lead story. So it cuts everything else off. And that can be kind of difficult when you then want to elevate people up afterwards. And it's just, you've got a lot of that. Heels faces, you've got that kind of variation going out the window. This is where, it's good that Cena is going to have that role. I actually think that is stronger. But it's one of them that you're going to see more complaints from WWE. That image, that public perception that they kind of carefully nurtured so well over the kind of last however long is, and we've seen it already this week. We've seen plenty of people complaining about different things. We've seen complaints from the women's division. There's time cuts, same sort of things. We're seeing it with their corporate side, which was always going to happen with a TKO takeover as they reduce benefits and increase workload in the way that they do. But it's also a question of a case of when I look at it like this, was Cena the right choice for now, or was he the right choice for future? And what is more important to TKO?
I think they have to, I think we've talked about this. The nature of the way TKO is set up is that they have to be focused on the now, always, immediately. They have to be doing better than last quarter. They have to be doing better than last year. They have to be selling more tickets. They have to be doing better ratings. They have to be, if not doing better ratings, getting more money, right? They have to be doing more now. And there's not, you talk about this when it comes to like ratings and other stuff, like you're going to build someone, you sacrifice your now, because you run the risk that people are going to be interested in someone that they don't know, and they might turn off the show and your minute by minute declines. But like, that's how you build somebody for the long term, is you make the audience care about them now. And if TKO cannot do that, then they're going to struggle. Now, have they struggled so far? Absolutely not. Could they end up with something, people jumping from AEW or something? I mean, Malachi Black could be a huge difference maker for them. Anything is possible, right? Like,
he didn't even use any sarcasm in that voice. I'm quite impressed.
I'm always trying to pop you with that. I just think I think it's sort of, it becomes difficult for them. But then you see like they've been able to do that in the past, so maybe they'll be able to do it now. I don't feel like I can predict sometimes what the WWE audience is going to be okay with, because they certainly seem to be fine with things that I think are, gross, but what can I tell you?
They have, it's a different audience. We always say that, but there's this constant pressure. It's not like they're going to suddenly struggle numbers wise, but there's this consistent pressure to deliver more, and they have to for their shareholders and for everyone else that's involved in TKO. And then if they don't, you start to see all these kind of window dressing. They're already talking about they need to increase live revenue, and they're going to increase prices. So you need things now, not in 6 months, not in 12 months. But if you only ever focus on the now, you're going to constantly kind of be hot-shotting or trying to find shock angles, and that does not last forever. You cannot get away with that forever. And then, if not, then you end up with window dressing like they did with the Saturday Night Main Event number, right? That we saw, or last Friday's SmackDown, which was dressed up immediately, with Fast Nationals, or even like the SmackDown deal, which was announced at 1.4, but actually works out at 1.1 if they're doing 6 months at 3 hours and 6 months at 2. So that's the kind of next things and the things that you kind of look out for to see how they're doing. But I just think it's been a really interesting dynamic, and some of the things that have come up to now have been pretty hilarious to watch. And maybe they were more interesting than what was going on screen, and that's what left things so open to The Rock. Because this is a whole thing. It goes back to October. When he turned up at Bad Blood?
Yes.
And he just turned up and went, "This is going on the main event because I'm going to be the main event," but he actually had nothing to say.
No.
He had nothing to say, and then he turns up on the Raw on Netflix debut. You know, late announcement. I'm going to turn up. I'm going to come out after Triple H has done the curtain thing, and I'm basically going to kill every part of the story. And now this is the thing. So he comes out and he kills every part of the story, and he's like, "I'm Cody Rhodes' friend," you know, and all that sort of thing.
Yep.
But now what they're going to look at is people are going to look at this because of the way that this has happened, and say it was the plan all along. The Rock's a genius.
Yep.
You can see it coming, right?
Oh yeah.
And then but it's so funny because he's obviously so personally got into that because he went on NXT the next night and gave another rambling speech about kind of whatever. And that's the other thing with The Rock. So everything with The Rock has kind of been like, it's up to him. He makes the decisions. There's been briefings going on now for 6 months, and then it missed all the little squabbling about, Seth and Punk are not going to be involved with Mania, or Punk and Roman are going to main event, and now Punk doesn't want the main event. None of that actually ended up mattering. And what really came down to was the stuff between Paul Levesque and The Rock. And then, culminating in The Rock turning up in New Orleans last week, cutting like a promo, which I think someone referred to it as Dave Meltzer as having more turns than the Big Show's entire career, which is an incredible quote. It was like watching tennis, honestly, going back and forth. But he kind of does what he wants. And now you've got this thing where people are looking at him as a leadership thing and not at Paul Levesque. And now you have that kind of confliction, especially because he can't keep to his character. No. So what I think he did so well last year was he was like, I'm a heel. And I'm going to put that on social media, and I'm going to do the promos, the ones that went for like 35 minutes, because I thought because he was going to get his time cut on TV like he was, whatever. But he kind of played into all that character. And then this year, he's now like, he was at press conference last night after Triple H, by the way, not to get that. And, and he's like, oh, I'm the corporate guy. We created this moment. We did this. I don't know if that's beneficial.
Again, like you said, it breaks that universe, like, that belief that like anything is possible. Is he really talking? Like it breaks that storyline stuff that I think hurts them more than they realize.
Yeah, it's and I don't feel sorry for Triple H. Let's be very clear.
Oh God,
right?
No.
This is a guy.
Fuck all these guys. I'm sorry. Like fuck these guys.
But this is a guy politically, right, who, in the early 2000s, he cut the legs off Chris Jericho. He cut the legs off Rob Van Dam. He cut the legs off Booker T. He did his absolute best to damage John Cena. He did his absolute best to kind of hand wave Dave Bautista going and filming Guardians of the Galaxy. This is a guy that lived off that kind of political control, and in fact to The Rock as well. I don't think The Rock forgets that. I think that's where this comes from. But it's now everywhere. Everyone can see it. It's now public. It's not these things we talk about that you can see happening behind closed doors. No, it's out there in front of them, and it's going to be very interesting how that kind of goes forward now. But there is sorry.
No, I when you talk about like wrestlers complaining, and we've talked about like leading indicators and like data and stuff like that, I always think of Punk bitching as like a leading indicator. Like if he's pissed, if he's pissed off enough that you are hearing about it in the press, and he's being like, he's not just leaking to like his buddies, he's actually like on video talking shit about other wrestlers' WrestleMania main events, then you know that like shit's not good backstage. Like there's some problems back there. Let's face it. I do recommend, if you've not watched that Daily Mail interview, that you'd like find Twitter. It's just so fucking funny. Punk did a whole thing where he was basically talking about how, he doesn't care about having a main event anymore. It's not something that really he cares about, because he knows that he'll have a better match and then he can go eat donuts. And it was just fucking great. It was so good. I digressed us, but.
No, it's, well, sometimes you find out where your spot is once at times, you just find these things out. But there is one thing I would look at as well. Like, so you're doing all this shock and awe, and you think The Rock's kind of numbers going to last forever. And I think they should look back at that 2001 to 2003 period, because that ended, this is kind of interesting to me. I was thinking a lot about this period this week. It ended with The Rock playing a heel. Had the match with Stone Cold Steve Austin at headlines at WrestleMania 19 in Safeco Field in Seattle, which didn't do very well. Not at a buy rate, not live. And then he had the job of being the guy putting over Bill Goldberg when he came into the company and at Backlash. And he played this half heel, half face, wasn't really, committing to anything, was the guy getting all the long segments in the rock concerts in Sacramento, because I can still hear that song in my head. So that tells you how much of a heel he was playing. And, it burned out Goldberg from the start, and then Triple H finished it off. But it's risky. And there's just as many risks as there are opportunities here. Numbers-wise at the start, they're going to see strong numbers. But it's, where does it end? Who are they putting over in the end? Are they going to try and make somebody new, or are we just solidifying everything behind Cody? And maybe that works, but you need people for Cody to face as well.
Right.
And you can't just get stuck with the same guys at the top. And that's the position they're kind of in now. We're going back to relying on that nostalgia kick. And they're not the only ones. I think, films, music, everything kind of society-wise is full of that right now. So it's kind of very much a representation of that. And that's what kind of keep them going. But you've got to be looking for them with the way that they want to build that company. You need to be looking 1, 2, 3 years. And at the moment, it just feels very much shock and awe.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
We shall see what happens. No, it's very, very interesting the way all of this has gone down. The fact that Rock has still been able to pull the numbers that give him the power behind the scenes to make these choices. Let's see what happens with the rest of Mania and with the rest of it after it. I'm most fascinated by Cena's retirement year that he's sort of completely been absent for, and interested, is that going to change? And if so, when, right? And is that going to have an impact at any point on their business? You talk about, one of the things that leads to fan dissatisfaction is not getting what you were advertised. If you bought a ticket early because you thought, well, I'll see Cena and he is not there, right? Does that piss you off? Again, nothing seems to piss off WWE fans, but
it does. It's just one of them things when, there are things that people are invested in and much, especially at the very, very top. It's always the same. They're much more willing to overlook other things. But I will say they are pretty good at advertising when Cena and The Rock and, not Rock, but and Roman are going to be there.
Yes.
So Cena has announced for 3 dates in Europe, Brussels, Glasgow, and London in March. He's not announced for other dates. So they've been very kind of clear as to which shows he is going to be at. But yeah, we all see if his role now increases, and it needs to. Their business now is very much based on that. But yeah, you can look at it and say they've created something hot on a program for WrestleMania now that wasn't, they didn't have anything previously. And I don't think a face Cena Cody thing would have caused the same level of investment as this likely will for the next few months. But it's all about what comes out of it. You can do many a moment, but if the follow-up's not there, then we all know where it goes. So, right.
Still fascinating to watch.
It is, yeah. There's a weird tendency, isn't there? Just it's addictive to kind of go, oh, we like the mess. Well, what's happening next?
Oh, yeah.
There we are. Okay. Should we get into this Ryan Nemeth complaint?
Yes. We got to go to the closet and get the box down again.
Yeah. This one's a badly drawn box.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that strongly.
So as we covered the Ryan Nemeth complaint back in December, we're going to cover the Ryan Nemeth lawsuit that was filed on February 21st, although the actual complaint was dated February the 14th. It was a 9-page complaint filed in California, Superior Court of California. And I don't even like how I've written that. And he's represented by the attorney Michael W. Caspino. And they now have a judge assigned to this case. As of Monday, Judge Tony L. Richardson will be the judge on this case. As of right now, and that's current, Nemeth is the only plaintiff in this case.
Yep.
At the current time, the defendants are AEW Tony Khan and Phil Brooks, CM Punk. Although Nemeth does note that he wishes to add at some point 20 other defendants, 10 once he realizes their identity, and 10 others, which is a kind of a strange thing to start. But this thing is full of strange things to start. Yeah. So he's suing for assault, breach of contract, breach of implied covenant and good faith and fair dealing, and intentional interference with prospective advantage. And what I wanted to do was just kind of work through what's legitimate about this, what can be challenged, what has been left out, and what other issues there are before we discuss kind of where this could potentially go. And, we've covered the two main bits of this complaint previously.
Yep.
And he's kind of detailed them here. So, but what I thought was interesting is how these have been detailed. So, one of the main parts of the complaint is the altercation at the June Dynamite in Chicago, and on June 21st. And he writes, his lawyer, their team, this complaint writes, on June 21st, 2023, following Brooks's return to the wrestling circuit, he assaulted Nemeth in the male talent locker room. In a menacing manner, Brooks shouted at Nemeth, "Do we have a fucking problem? Do we need to step outside and handle shit like men?" Nemeth was cornered by Brooks and did everything he could in order to de-escalate the situation. The next day, Nemeth was contacted by Tony Schiavone and other executives from AEW to explain what happened. Nemeth calmly and factually explained that he was attacked by Brooks in the locker room. Following the assault, nothing happened to Brooks as far as punishment from AEW. So this is the key thing around his entire complaint, is this incident with CM Punk post the Chicago promo that he cut on Collision and Nemeth tweeting the softest man alive. And do you know what I find was interesting is you think about it, we've read so many lawsuits as of late.
Yep.
And so many of them use these key details, and they provide a picture. They try and build a picture for this case for anyone that's kind of following it and for the judge. And, I don't think this really does that. So the first printing of this particular incident was by Wade Keller in August of 2023. Compare this to this. So at that Dynamite, PW Torch sources indicated Punk confronted Nemeth in the locker room. The story conveyed to PW Torch is that Punk cornered Nemeth in the locker room. Thanks, Wade. Got inches from his face and angrily and aggressively asked if they had a problem or if they needed to settle things outside. Punk cited to Nemeth that his comments on Twitter inflamed existing tensions and the optics of the tweet sent a bad message. The incident was witnessed by numerous wrestlers and has been characterized as awkward and weird. Nemeth moved the argument to the hallway where Punk continued to berate him, according to our sources. Nemeth defended his judgment in calling Punk soft since Punk fired the first shots at the Bucks. Punk pushed back that his timing was bad and he had worked against the public image they were going for, that everyone was either on the same page or at least not inflaming prior issues. Nemeth then asked Punk if he shouldn't react to things Punk says on TV, and Punk said that he had the right said they'd be the right choice at that time. They then shook hands, but apparently the tension was still high and they went their separate ways. Nemeth confided the incident in friends backstage and asked how to handle the situation. He had almost no leverage in AEW compared to Punk, who is a much bigger star, so Nemeth backed off and laid low since his job could be at risk if Punk spoke out behind the scenes against him. He's even deactivated his Twitter since. It just seems to me like the Torch, even just the Torch article, has so much more detail.
Yep.
Than what this did.
It's much more evocative.
Yeah. And, Wade this week was speaking about it, and he mentioned that one of the key things was that, a lot of the witnesses felt that Punk was looking for a reason to escalate this into violence. Yeah.
Yes.
Like he's looking for a reason to escalate, or not just into violence, or to get a reason to get him gone. But this doesn't portray that. This actually sounds a lot more like what was said to Dave Meltzer about settling things like men. So it's a very kind of, for something that's a real key incident and is about intimidation, about, by a member of management, by an employee of the company, as, related to his firing document. But it doesn't really portray that. It just looks like a standard incident. And it just feels like this whole thing is just so much more kind of focused on other things. So, he talks about Tony Khan's admiration for Punk. And there is some evidence of that. And actually in that same Wade Keller report, do you want to read this bit? Because I am not reading things well.
Yeah, so this is from the same Wade Keller article, and talks about Punk and how other wrestlers feel about Punk and Tony Khan's relationship. And a quote, Wrestlers are in an awkward position when it comes to speaking out against Punk in any way, since Tony Khan has made it clear he's not only a big part of AEW's business strategy to sell tickets, sell pay-per-views, and draw ratings, with Collision being launched as in great part to be a vehicle for Punk, but also that Khan himself is personally a big fan of Punk. When Punk first returned earlier this summer after his hiatus, dating back to the prior year's all-out media Q&A, Khan stood up backstage in gorilla position with his headset on and started pumping his fist and chanting CM Punk enthusiastically as Punk walked by. The feeling backstage among wrestlers not in a position of power with a big contract is to lay low when it comes to Punk because you don't want to be on what is essentially his enemies list.
And again, that's like, it's so much more clarity involved. So you don't need to go into these hyperbole statements and, basically making out like he was sat at the bottom of his stairs, like it's like Romeo
Weeping.
and Juliet,
Yeah.
weeping. Like, you can just use what's actually there. And there's many other statements and like that. You can think back to some of the comments that Wade Keller had on record back in that March of that year. But there is, and then the other key bit that actually is kind of legible was around Punk banning him from that Collision. So he lists why, and that is confirmed by Voices of Wrestling. They have the quote, Punk himself told a flagship source, I 100% of the reason behind Nick Nemeth and Christopher Daniels were sent home. Okay, so everyone is kind of in agreement that you were intimidated by someone in a massively aggressive manner who a lot of people there believe, and there was a lot of witnesses believe, wanted to escalate the situation. You were then unbooked for a long period of time and then brought back. Your complaint that you listed to Fightful that you said was sent to AEW last September stated that you were brought back because of John Moxley saying it didn't sit right. Interesting enough, that doesn't feature in this lawsuit.
Nope.
But no one has denied it either. Let's be very clear.
Yes.
Yep. And then what happened is that you saw Punk in a hotel. You say he sent a text message straight away. But what was clear is that he was responsible for you not being allowed to work that program. That is pretty much your legal argument. These are the things that you kind of have. I don't think it was laid out well. I don't think it paints a picture. In fact, there's no photos, no text messages, no phone records.
No evidence whatsoever.
Yeah, and these are all things that he claimed he had when that complaint was filed, was kind of publicized through Fightful back in December.
Right.
Now, but there are some things that are absolutely like, what the fuck is going on about this, right? So I can take or leave any statements he makes about his own kind of success. I couldn't care less, to be honest. There's different levels of success, so who am I to judge? But the stuff around Tony Khan is just like a complete mischaracterization and a complete joke. So the idea that he was moved out of leadership positions at Fulham Football Club and Jacksonville Jaguars, which both list him still in the same positions. One is said by mismanagement, which has caused lawsuits. Now, Fulham Football Club have had one lawsuit against them in the last decade. And this was around a young footballer who was injured playing against Fulham that was actually successfully challenged by the club. The only other lawsuits or legal action is referring to previous owner Mohammed Al Fayed, which I think we spoke about with the Harrods stuff a few months ago in relation to how Harrods and Fulham have been kind of dealing with that in comparison to WWE and TKO with Vince McMahon. And, these claimants are around sexual misconduct and other behaviors have nothing to do with the Khan family whatsoever.
Right.
In fact, they're dealing with these issues from their previous ownership. So I think that's a horrendous thing to potentially kind of try and play into. And, there's other descriptions as well of Tony that are just a joke. Like,
yeah. Well, even the photo that they used in the lawsuit, right? Which was a picture of Tony Khan from the NFL draft day with the neck brace on, right? The intention seemed to be to make him look like the biggest loser possible. And to, yeah.
Yeah, it's just, that sort of stuff is like, why? I don't understand what you gain from that. And it's the same thing. So even as simple things as, there's a statement in early 2023, Brooks assaulted and battered two fellow wrestlers known by the stage name's man Nick Jackson. Brooks is known to have an uncontrollable temper and often lashes out in violent tirades against others. Okay, so other than the all-out incident, I don't think there's a physical incident on record since the Teddy Hart incident fight back in TNA in the mid-2000s. Yeah. So I don't think you can say that he's known for many things. And maybe if you want to talk verbal kind of or kind of that sort of thing, maybe, but we don't know. But in public record, it's not. I think the evidence to say that the Bucks were battered is kind of let down by publicly. There's photos of Matt Jackson 2 days after with not a scratch on his face.
Right.
So how can you say it's battered? I don't think there's one report that suggests that Punk touched Nick Jackson, let alone hurt him. All that damage was caused by Ace Steel.
Right.
So again, it's these little things, but they're like serious things a day. And the date's wrong on that. Early 2023. I mean, that's got to be the most obvious date ever. And it's not word. So that's it. And then we get on to the worst one. So the blackball thing. Okay. So he says that they were attempting or are attempting to blackball him. And I think it's very difficult for him to prove that. So you currently work for TNA Wrestling. In fact, on the date that this became public, he had a world title match on that program. Since then, he has appeared in New Japan. And I wouldn't try and claim that the Nemeths were kind of kicked out of New Japan because of, CM Punk or AEW, because it's quite widely known that the office were just not happy with Nick Nemeth's performance or wasn't happy with, how in terms of not getting over with the New Japan crowd. And it's now seen as a major mistake. And is one of the reasons why, bringing in Baron Corbin was met with such resistance and has now had a reduced role or potentially no role. So that's not going to be worth an argument. And then he was even brought back to AEW.
Right.
And it was mentioned in the complaint that he filed that, Tony offered to bring him back, after the dates that he actually worked. And then he said he didn't want to come back. So that was missing from this also. So I don't think there was a chance that you can say that you were blackballed. No. Because you're still working in this industry. This isn't a Pollyanna case. You are still part of this industry now. And in fact, you're in a similar position, pay per appearance, on a national TV deal, with actually more coverage than it had a year ago because of this WWE thing.
Right.
But the other case is that, he claims this is because Tony blames him solely for Punk leaving to go to WWE. Well, Punk didn't leave, he was fired. And he was fired by Tony Khan. So legally, he blames CM Punk for his actions. Legally. Yeah?
Yep.
Okay. And then to go with that, how can you say that it was just you? And I can see it from a sense of you thinking that kind of situation at that Dynamite or the things that happened that expanded from the Dynamite, from the collision in Greensboro were like perhaps like triggers. But there's debate about that. What happened in Greensboro, a lot of people believe that was a response to the Elite being re-signed.
Right.
That's where that kind of triggered and fell off. But you can look all the way back. You can look to Punk trying to get out of his contract in December of 2022. You can look at everything that happened with the WBD stuff in the spring. You can look at the ESPN article, the Raw visit. Yeah. There are numerous things. This was a chain of behavior. You were one part in that, but I do not believe, and I don't think anybody else believes, that this was the one sole reason that Punk was fired, if you believe that Tony did it out of necessity and you were the start of this chain. I don't think anybody believes that. I think there was, you were this occasion, but this could have been anybody else. And it goes with that saying that, Jack Perry, this is out there publicly, was, put out with the statement with the Wrestling Observer that in his story back in March of 2024, that he didn't hear from Tony Khan for 2 months following All In. And then and Perry said he never texted to say he was sorry, although that's been debated. So he was. That's the bit we thought was in kayfabe. And they finally had an in-person meeting before Full Gear where they discussed plans to bring it back in December. However, after Punk returned to WWE at Survivor Series, those plans were scrapped. Well, as much as the first bit is kayfabe, the bit that he dropped meetings after Survivor Series is from very good source that I spoke to this week is true. So if you are going to claim that you were the only person responsible, the only person that Tony may have had feelings kind of around after this, well, there is something out publicly that disputes that. And that's a lot of this stuff, you know? There's so many of these things that can be publicly kind of disputed that it just feels like you haven't done your homework, essentially. And there's a lot of that stuff. The stuff about WBD, and yes, they want to keep him, but no, Collision was not just made for Punk.
No.
You know, and WBD, this thing as well, that WBD only kind of have ever made a request about a talent like Punk, and that's not true.
That is not true.
No, there are many other talents that have increased their leverage or, you know, had a place because of WBD asks. So, you know, these things just don't stand up. And to go with it, the date's been incorrect. I think the date of his last appearance he puts down as November 18th, which and then says that's when Punk left. And I think that's a deliberate play to say that that was his last date, and then he was stop used when actually, you know, Punk was fired and then he was used after. That's just such a poor play. And then, honestly, this is just a Mickey Mouse lawsuit. It's
a joke. I think the thing that I find so frustrating about this, and reading this I was frustrated by, is that Nemeth is wronged. Nemeth was wronged. You know, like, whatever you want to say, like, you want to be one of those people, it's like, he's just a jobber. The star should be able to do whatever the fuck he wants. Like, the guy was wronged. He had a job. He got treated like shit. He got yelled at in the locker room. Like, there's no disagreement or argument about that, right? You know, Tony Khan is weird about CM Punk. I don't think that's a statement that anyone could disagree with, right? I think you and I probably have, you know, plenty of fucking evidence to argue that that's the case, okay? There's enough public stuff out there to show that Nemeth was wronged. And it's like, do you want us to take that seriously, dude? Because if you want us to take that seriously, then file a serious lawsuit. Like, you and I have no fucking legal training. We could have written a better lawsuit on this than this. You and I have gone through and put together pieces to show an overall pattern that would have been better than this, right? And this guy obviously knows more about this shit than we do. So for me, the frustration part is, if you want me to take this seriously, then you have to take this seriously. And what this lawsuit says to me is that you don't take this seriously. Right? And that I find incredibly, incredibly frustrating, because the point of people in wrestling, power in wrestling being in the hands of a small few who then get to treat a large number of other people like absolute garbage because they're the powerful ones, is bullshit, and is something that justifiably needs to change. And we talk about this all the time in multiple companies. And this kind of stuff where, you know, people can just laugh and dismiss everything that Ryan Nemeth says because of the obvious and stupid errors and the misleading statements that he's made, you know, it doesn't help that, right? So that's what I find frustrating about this. And, you know, it's yeah.
Right. It makes a mockery out of something that is a serious issue, and it sets everybody back. Yep. And none of this wording helps anybody. No one agrees. In fact, no one actually thinks that this is helping anybody at all.
No.
And all we've done is, you made yourself a Mickey Mouse lawsuit or a Mickey Mouse lawyer. And look, would any of these other parties want this to go discovery? Of course they wouldn't.
No.
You know, just the investigation into All Out 2022 and the interviews that were conducted before and the recommendations from All Out 2023, that being public would be hugely damaging to AEW and to Tony Khan. I don't want that out there. There's probably other people in AEW that would have no issue with that being out there. But, you know, they don't want that out there. They don't want to see these things to see the light of day. But what's the point? This should be dismissed. Surely, like, the state of this, there is nothing that I could see that would convince people that this was legitimate, because there are so many issues and things to point out, and then things that were claimed in his previous complaint that are now missing, you know, including like the Ring of Honor promo that he cut when he was brought back the week after Greensboro. Or the fact that he filed a complaint to AEW is actually missing from this document as well.
Right. Right.
So it makes you question the validity. And I think they will look into that, and they will start on that validity because of how many issues there are with this. Muppet. Sorry.
No,
Muppet.
it's very frustrating, and it's frustrating for so many reasons. And I think, you know, Yeah, Muppet is a good. I can't pull that off without the accent, but it's the same. It's the same sort of
We'll teach you the accent at some point, just to say Muppet, or we can just do Muppet in like Long Island voice. I don't know.
Muppet.
Yeah, well, that's the end of that section.
Yeah. Moving on.
So following up on we had a long discussion following up on BTE last week.
Yes,
and it's been interesting to see some of the feedback. So thank you so much for so much of the feedback to that discussion. And what kind of made me think was there was some descriptions, so there was some well thought out stuff, and there was some that was just like, well, people just miss it because they want it to be parasocial. And it really made me think about what the word parasocial actually means in the modern age, and whether these can be kind of positive or negative relationships, or whether that's, it's just used as a kind of a blanket term. And especially because when you look at, pro wrestling, things like have played into kind of allowing you to see more of these people's lives, or even in a constructive manner. So, BT was that in some ways. And you look at something like Total Bellas, which Dean Ambrose, John Moxley's appeared on, and Bryan Danielson, appeared on, and that created a huge fan base for the Bella Twins, and which felt quite foreign if you weren't part of that in a way when you're at live events and that sort of thing. But they had that kind of sense of community. And I think about the same when you watch shows like Quarterback on Netflix, or you watch football shows or anything like that. This goes back to magazines and newspapers. This has always been this thing where people have wanted to know more about other people's lives.
Yeah,
but in wrestling, it's like there's this blur because you have this line between what's real and what's not, and how much of that character is real and what's not. But what I want to say to you is, do you think that, missing BTE, or missing the way that we challenge them characters, or we look at these stories or them sort of things, do you think that that's parasocial?
I think that in wrestling, parasocial has become a shorthand for a thing that girls are into that I don't understand and slightly makes me uncomfortable. That's kind of what it boils down to, right? Because it's almost always used in the context of female fans of wrestling, right? You hardly ever see male fans called parasocial. Even the weirdo Joshi stan guys, like the freak Joshi stan guys, those guys are almost rarely ever called parasocial, right? It's always about girls and like what they're into. I think that they're like, first of all, I'm just going to state this at the top of this because I want to make it clear. Parasocial stuff, it's a real term. It describes a real phenomenon. These people actually really exist, right? I'm not going to do this. But I think anyone who has spent any kind of time in a woman-dominated fandom doesn't think that anything BTE related is like weirdly fucking parasocial, right? Like sometimes I genuinely wonder if people who call BTE fans parasocial think that people think they actually know like the Jacksons as human beings and like they think they're friends with them, right? And maybe there's a couple of weirdos that do, but like the vast majority of people are like, I don't know. Like it's one of those things, and like some of this is like difficult to argue against because it's vibe based rather than like, evidence based, which I always don't care for when it comes to this. Why you and I don't tend to have vibes based discussions, but like I don't know, like people liked BTE as a show. They thought it was cool. It was the thing that made them happy, and they enjoyed it on a Monday. These were wrestlers and personalities that they liked. They were characters on a television show. Nobody misses BTE because they think that the Young Bucks are really their friends. Like, that's the part where I'm just like, why would anybody even begin to suggest that? Like, again, it strikes the heart of like, why would you like this? To me, the thing that comes down to this, right? So our producer, Leah, had a very smart thing to say about this, which I'm going to probably go to, which is, and I'm quoting her from a message she sent, where Leah said, the idea of being a long-term wrestling fan without genuinely caring about and rooting for your favorite wrestlers is so foreign to me. I understand the idea that not all fans bother to follow wrestlers on Instagram or weren't interested in the behind-the-scenes vlogs, but the concept that you can be so mired and into the IWC bog, writing reviews of wrestling, listening to podcasts, spending your life thinking about the industry, but you think the concept of rooting for your favorites to be personally successful and getting satisfaction from seeing their success is somehow harmful does not make sense to me. And that's me, right? Like that's where I'm at with this. And I think, building on this from her, I think part of it is that some of this comes from this idea that smart fans feel that wrestlers are always trying to trick them, right? So they have to be on the lookout for that. So like if a wrestler's like being nice in a video, like there's got to be an angle to it. And so like if you're like a real smart fan, like you're not going to fall for that shit, right? They're not really, like they're not, what do you hear over and over again? They're not your friends, right? Like, yeah, no shit. I have actual friends. I know what those relationships are like. This does not resemble that in any way. These are characters I'm watching on TV. Like, I always find that to be like, that to me is one of the most condescending things that you could ever say to a fan. These are not your friends. As though I don't understand what a friendship looks like and what a television do you think that Taylor Swift fans think she's their friend? Right? Like, this is where do some wrestling fans interact with other fandoms in any way whatsoever? Do people think that Travis Kelce is their, who won the Super Bowl? I don't know. Name a sports guy. Do people think that LeBron James is their friend? Like, no, fucking of course they don't. But they still fucking buy his jersey and root for him. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you dudes? Like, why are you so cynical and such weirdos?
But there's this concept where people think they know people.
Yes.
And some of this is like a brand, it's a marketing thing. So you think something like Triple H, right? This brand of like Uncle Paul and that sort of thing has been carefully nurtured. And we talked about it earlier with all the kind of intros and the Levesque era. All of that stuff is so you have like this positive kind of parasocial relationship with him where you see him for a certain way. So you have this trust in him. And therefore, you're going to look over some of these things that happen booking wise, or it's not his fault. Or, and even that happens with talent. You think about that thing, Vince never fired me. It was John Laurinaitis or JR, whoever. It's the same thing. It's the same mindset. So this doesn't just go to fans. That happens to people in the business.
Of course,
right? But then, and it's the same with like someone like CM Punk. That's that whole brand, that whole market. Is that you think this guy? You think you know what he stands for?
Trish, how many men have said, they're not your friends, and then turned around and reassured us of CM Punk's motives, right? Reassured us that Punk's not really he wants to be a heel, you guys, okay? Like you're telling me that you know what this man is thinking, and then in the same breath calling me parasocial because I miss BTE. Dudes, what the fuck?
But it's the idea of marketing that it's become very much essential now that a lot of media is becoming so much more disrupted. So you've seen a lot of people struggling to kind of market things in a way that they did previously in films, in music, in other media. And the way that they can do this is like having these closer relationships. So they are kind of wanting you to want to know more and being able to give you that content. And you see it this week. I think Stephanie McMahon said she was launching a podcast, which means she'll be re-signed with WWE, by the way. But the whole idea of that is you think about this, right? So she, for as awful as her promos can be, is a very good talker in a way of making you think she's human.
Yes.
And getting their talk, and she's a much better person at getting their talking points across than Triple H's.
Yes.
By a fucking country mile. So she is now going to be this female voice of WWE. And people are going to connect with that in a way that they won't do by reading 20 articles.
Right.
About everything else that's gone on with WWE and with the McMahon families. They're not. They're going to have this they're going to believe that she is this person and they are therefore going to trust in what she says and not what they read, which is the whole point of this as a marketing tool.
It makes me think that a lot of these people are not going to be getting they'll still send these people the engagement and the bullshit PR shit. Cheeseman is still going to get his.
It's just another way to kind of say. But I think you're right on something that this has become used as a buzzword, especially against female parts of the fan base, and what BTE was as a vehicle. And when we talk about it, I think there was this misconception that we wanted it back completely, or, we need to let go of the idea that AEW was going to be this change. But no, the idea is that you had something that allowed for secondary engagement that also allowed you to kind of invest in these character stories and kind of have a community feel about that. It was, a time you had every week, everyone at the same time, and, you could explore these characters. And that's missing. They never replaced that. That's where they're losing out, that there's not this community feel, this community engagement. That Taylor Swift thing is all about community engagement.
Right.
Community. That's where the bracelet things come from. That's the whole thing. So now it's just being used rather than looking at, how that affects social engagement, how they're working with social, is there positive and negative parasocial relationships, and negative ones come from when lines are crossed, so you have to set boundaries. But people are using this, and companies are using this for their engagement and to increase kind of loyalty to their companies when traditional methods have now failed. But in wrestling, it seems to be used as a way to basically dispel the views of female fans and what they're into, and the way that the product is changing to reflect the change in their audience.
Right.
So here's a news point for you. That Rock show, SmackDown, the other week, that number that went up, that was the highest viewed SmackDown since the debut in overall, and the second equal to the Friday before the Royal Rumble on in 1849.
Yep.
That was primarily powered by women. Women was the big demo that was up with that. The Adam Cole MJF summer program, women 35 to 49. The Omega Page program, women. The MJF Punk program, women. Punk's the only one with women, by the way. The programs that have been most successful in the last decade all have huge women viewership. We are not in this era no more where you can just ignore a huge part of your audience, especially when you're looking to keep your ratings up when sport kicks in, just like we got next month with March Madness.
Right.
This idea that they should only market to men is just such a foreign concept and is such a loss maker. Right? Why would you cut off so much of your audience? But I also think there's this conception of what men want that I think is incorrect.
I don't disagree.
There was some viral comments that went on this week from
my God.
a podcast, and mainly on Blue Sky, from a podcast called Shake Them Ropes. Don't go and attack them. It's just that's where it came from. We might as well tell you.
Don't give them the time. Don't do the timer energy. Like, this is part of this thing. We're going to talk about it because I think it's an important thing to talk about. But at the same time, like, just don't even leave it alone.
And the things that went viral was calling kind of numerous people on our show as having better male energy.
Beta male energy.
Sorry.
I want to make sure that the Americans that listen to us understand what words being said, because we're troglodytes these days. So, I'm getting such a look.
This is a visual shake of the head that's now being replayed during audio.
Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to say ahoy or land ho and not feel weird about it. So here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance offers access to the largest towing fleet on the water. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to say, shiver me timbers, and not feel weird about that either. Get more with Geico.
But they've commented on that Big Bill and Hobbs should have opened Grand Slam instead of Kenny and Will Ospreay. That Adam Page and MJF were both weeping emotionally. Prince Nana's crying about a jacket he won't get back. The show, their quote was, the show is littered with the ninnies that the world champion of this company says he hates. The same world champion, by the way, that was very happy to be on Total Bellas. Yeah. But this is this conception that all men need to see this kind of physical conflict that has no structure behind it, no emotion behind it, no storytelling. It's just here and then. Okay, there might be a portion of the male fan base that feels like that, but that's not our experience.
No.
Actually, they want to be just as invested in a story as everybody else. And that happens in sport as well. That we have this concept of, it doesn't happen anywhere else. Do you not get worked up by a story where someone comes back from an underdog run like the Mets last year, getting to, just close to the World Series? Like, that's that sort of magic. They want to be captivated. People want to be expressed. They want to get involved in these sort of things. Actually, there's been too long where people have tried to control how people think and talk about wrestling, that there was this thing that you cannot feel like that. You cannot talk about this, especially if you're a man. You can't. Like, it's fucking bullshit.
But but even if you look at some of these programs that are like supposedly like that, when from our perspective we didn't see a lot of like storytelling leading up to them, these guys were making shit up in their fucking heads. Like the people who wanted Bryan Danielson to win the world title weren't doing it based on the program they were watching on television. They were doing it based around shit in their heads that they were fantasy booking about his whole career. Same about Bryan versus Nigel. That was some history shit that these guys came up with in their fucking heads that they loved and wanted to see. It wasn't what was on the fucking television, but it was still a story. It wasn't just about the fucking wrestling moves. Like there was still something to it. There was an emotional hook for them, right? Like it's not just like, you know, and if you are in a place where you think that anybody calling anything beta male is like you should do it, don't like guys, it's 2025, dudes. Like I get that it's scary out there, I get that it's terrifying that women have jobs and money now, but like think about what kind of a loser you have to be to say that these wrestlers who are like the embodiment of fucking manly energy are fucking beta males because they're expressing emotion. Like, come on, dudes. Like, just rethink everything about everything you're doing. Just go into a quiet room with a dark, like, draw the shade, like, turn off your phone and just rethink everything that you're doing.
How do you think they felt when pretty much every social media platform basically changed into some sort of teenage magazine on Wednesday night with the same image over and over again? Someone compared it to like 94 Razor Ramon energy, and I was like, yeah, I can see that.
My favorite reaction to that, like, and I just fucking, like, I want to say this, right? We talking a lot today about shitty dudes, and I don't want to do that thing where we talk about shitty dudes. Like, there's so many wonderful dudes out there. Like, guys, the ones of you that are great, like, we see you. We fucking love you. Like, keep doing what you're doing. We appreciate it so much. Like, the number of men who are like, oh, I'm so excited for you, ladies. Look at that awesome, like, look at that hot guy being hot in the ring. Good for you. Like, thank you. We did enjoy that. I appreciate it very much. Like, like we don't have to be at war. We could be friends and allies. Like, you still enjoyed it because like dudes got beat up. Like there was blood and yelling and cursing. Like, come on, let's all be friends and get along. Like, come on. Oh God. But seriously, like, I don't know. Like you look at like the excitement level, and we'll talk about this a little bit, right? But the excitement level for AEW between January and February has changed so much. Mm-hmm. And it's based around the programs that they're running. And the big piece of those programs is MJF and Hangman, is Swerve and Ricochet, is Tony and Mariah, is Ospreay, and like to a lesser extent now because it was more of a lead up to Glenn, I said whatever. But like these are the stuff that people are getting excited about. Why would you want to shit on it? Like Hobbs and Big Bill are great. And if you love them, that's awesome, right? Are they giving me a lot? No. But am I like, hey, cool, it's your thing. I'm glad you guys got to see a big Hoss match. That seems really important to you. I'm like, why are you threatened by a thing I like? I'm not bothered by what you like. Like, we're just, seriously.
But yeah, no, there has been a switch change, and we might as well move into that as we are here. And the focus of the show has changed quite dramatically.
Big time.
So we've seen, you know, guys like Jeff Jarrett kind of exit stage right.
He's not been on television since he lost to fucking Claudio in the last show in January. Gone.
Bye, out of here. No, full on out of here. And then we've seen the kind of the downplaying of the main event angle for Revolution.
Yeah, and when we talk about downplaying, like, I think one of the things that's important is to look at the advertising that AEW does in the lead up to its television shows, right? So if you're on Twitter and you see those little video packages that they cut and put together, right? Or you're watching like the video packages that are showing on television, they have gone from focusing significantly on Mox and Cope to kind of downplaying that a little bit. And if you even watch the video stuff, they had a big video package on Dynamite that they showed for Revolution. And they, like, the percentage of time being spent on the main event angle versus the percentage of time he spent on other angles was significantly different. And I think if you go back and look at like, I think if you look at some of the ratings and like, my fault for not getting into this is one of those things. Sometimes you have an idea late of what you want to do for a podcast and then realize late that you probably should have researched it earlier. But I think that you can look at some of the data and see that at no point was the Mox Cope stuff really driving any of their ratings, right? Like it wasn't like really turning their, and when I talk about their ratings, I'm talking more about the 90-day trend, because like when you look at like quarter to quarter or show to show, or even year over year, like you can see some patterns emerge, but the patterns are always going to be more important than any singular data point. And if you look at the ratings data and the trends for like the last 90 days that WrestleNomics does such a great job of putting these graphics together, you can really see that at no point was like the main event angle stuff really driving any engagement. And I think you can even see it online. We talk about the secondary engagement was a big thing. Like were people really excited about Mox and Cope? Were we seeing a lot of videos being made and fan engagement and like people talking about it, or like retweets on Twitter of stuff that they were really enjoying? No, we really kind of weren't. Like, and I think that's why part of the reason that some of this stuff has taken a back seat. Like they've definitely slowed down on how they're promoting this.
Well, in terms of their actual rating numbers, for a top-line program that's been going on it's a 2-month program, so a long-term program, over 5 weeks for a world title program. I was struggling in my head to, when I looked at numbers earlier, to kind of come up with one that's performed less. So Swerve and Danielson's a kind of an interesting one, but actually still held a little bit better than this. Joe Page and Swerve this time last year was, carrying the show alongside the Bucks and Sting and Darby, but had all the top segments. Yes. The week before it opened the show, before Revolution. The week before, and the week before that, it closed the show. They had huge Q4, Q5 segments protected in the middle of the show, 25-minute promos. And then you can go back. Joe and Max is probably the only is kind of comparable to this. So that was down cycled as the C2 come in,
yep.
And as kind of criticism kind of raised up. So that's kind of an interesting point. But then things like Cole Max Danielson, Moxley and Max, Page and Cole. That's probably similar to this as well. They're the two. But the ones that have kind of fell away from 1, 5, and 8 quarters and who are limited screen time have been ones where they've either had criticism or they weren't priority. And that's what we're saying. These shows are not built around the Death Riders. They're not advertised. Nope. They're not on screen. They're doing small segments. And these shows are, especially, and we're talking mainly about Dynamite here because that's the one where you see this. And they're being built primarily around, MJF and Hangman, and then Swerve and Ricochet, and then, a mixture of Ospreay, Omega, and the Don Callis family, and then, Tony and Mariah, and various other things. But you can look at this world title program and say it's like 5th in terms of presentation and from the top. And that's a recognition, I think, of where this is going. And you've seen that because they've completely changed this story now.
Yes.
So we started out with FTR are the best of friends with Adam Copeland. FTR now don't care. In fact, like FTR had a tag match and never came out to save anybody afterwards, which is
this one
funny.
Also. This one baffles me because like I don't understand. Like you couldn't keep FTR off television until after Revolution. Like why do they have to come back to like? It's like we were off TV for 2 weeks and now we're back and we like fuck Cope. We don't care about him. Our tremendous friendship that was built around God and our families is dead. We are kind of care about the Undisputed Kingdom, but not really. Sort of. We're not sure if we do. Like that's just some fucking weird booking right there. And like at the very least, you'd think they would place the segments in such a way that like you're not as you said, you're not following an FTR match with a Cope beatdown angle. Like where did those dudes go?
Well, it's like the whole setup for that. And then, they're just not there. And it's like, but we started out this way, like, they're the best of friends. So they got revenge for Ricky Morton and then they were gone. Is that the story? And now they're back to the tag division, but they're in the trios division.
They had special jackets made. You'd think the friendship would last longer than 3 weeks.
Yeah, and this is kind of like where this story is right now, right? So we've gone from this being about the originals and he's going to raise people up and we're going to make these people. Well, that story's gone. Garcia's not interested now.
No.
That was in the thing. Orange Cassidy's back on the pre-show.
Yep.
Hangman, we'll talk about in a minute. They need to keep him as far away as possible from this if they're not going to end up with it.
Or not Trish.
Well, maybe. But you're now at this position where everything that you talked about originally in this story, other than your dynamic with Wheeler Yuta, is gone. it's shot. And you've definitely shot it with this program, and then you can't make Cope, who's doing every WWE cliche that he's ever had, including the weird shirts and the concerto and everything else. You can't make him the defender of AEW. So instead, what we did was we started out with, I have friends, and I'm not an idiot, unlike these AEW jobbers. Yep. Which is the way that this has been portrayed. And now and then it was like, oh, but we need to do these beat downs, and we're going to do these Scooby-Doo angles, and then we need to change that. And rightfully so. Actually, yeah, you did need to pivot on that. But what you pivoted to was, these guys are now cowardly heels, and we can beat them 2-on-4. And Cope is mega strong. He's taking out all of them in the Hunter way, which is actually probably what the storyline we felt would be for Darby Allin. Because Claudia had beaten him. So now there's we've kind of taken that measure out, and it leaves you in a place where, they're telling a much more simple story now that we've reversed it 3 times, even though we messed up the finish in Australia, that he's taken these people out one by one. But it doesn't make any sense in terms of that original storyline. So we've abandoned it. So I guess the question is this, there's, I think there's some people that think that Copeland's going to win this match, by the way. Yeah. I don't think that's the case. I think that I think Copeland loses this match, so he says that he's a team player and that sort of thing, even though the guy that he's putting over is a WWE guy, and the second one that he's put over, and it weakens who he is. And I think there's one other thing that we'll come back to as well. But there's a Swerve Ricochet match, and the winner is the number 1 contender. I think you can, and Tim Hunter's asked us a question that relates to this. Do you think if Swerve wins the title from Mox, they should do Hangman Swerve at All In? Oh, God.
Tim, you know what we're going to fucking say, dude.
So, here's the thing, and we'll talk about this more after the pay-per-view next time, because that'll be more of a time to check in on this. But the idea that an original needs to be the person that beats Jon Moxley, I think that's gone. This story is so far from where it started. Yeah. It's unrecognizable, and nobody really kind of even remembers that or thinks about that, and it's not in the mind frame. He has a briefcase and a belt, and a belt in a briefcase, and that's probably the only thing that people actually remember. And the fact that they're still doing a part of a story with vulnerability with Wheeler Yuta, which is the strongest bit of it. Although, Orange Cassidy's involved.
I'm going to say that I'm interrupting you to say this. If Cope is involved in Wheeler Yuta turning on Moxley, I'm going to be rip shit, right? Because that should have been I'm going to be rip shit, and I'm going to be rip shit about my special little guy. That should have been the fucking ending in Full Gear, right? Why fucking Cope would be involved in Yuta and I'm getting pre-mad, so I'm not going to do it, right? But it doesn't make sense, and they better not fucking do it. But I overall, look, from my perspective, I think that pivoting this into a basic wrestling angle has improved it significantly. Okay. Mm-hmm. Cutting down on the amount of time these guys have week to week, making this stuff fairly straightforward, even though it's super edge and he looks incredibly strong, and it's great that he's be able to beat these guys in a way that nobody else could have, yada, yada, yada. Am I annoyed at that if I think about it too long? Of fucking course I am, but I don't think about it too long because these guys aren't on TV that much. They're coming in, getting out. They're thank you very much. I'm going to focus on the shit I like. And I think that's one of the things that you can see this year that we were seeing this month that we were not seeing in January, which is there's other stuff to watch. Remember that thing we talked about where it was like the people off screen shouldn't be making a better show than the ones on screen? That's not happening anymore. There's plenty of other stuff to get interested in that we don't have to be mad about these fucking guys doing whatever fucking crazy shit they're doing, right? Like the concerto and the Willow thing and all that other bullshit. It's improved, but it's not better, but does that make sense? It's improved, but it's not better.
Yeah, it's now, it's not palatable, but you can kind of.
It's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. Aggressively fine.
It's no longer the worst thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, but I don't think it's helping anything either.
It's not doing anything good.
No, you're now at the point where you get out of this cycle and that's kind of thing.
You're waiting for it to end so you can see the guys you like.
Yeah, and I would be very careful about feeding anybody else to this now. I don't believe it has to be an original at this point. I think if you want to have Swerve Strickland do it, I think that would probably be a better solution than what you're going to do currently. But it's a case of there's nothing else to feed to this story now. It doesn't have that momentum. It's not hot. There's no reason to keep feeding baby faces to it. And now that you've done this storyline with Cope and you've made them vulnerable, then you need to increase that vulnerability and they need to crumble. This is the beginning of the end now. This should be the beginning of the end.
Correct.
Of this story. The other thing that needs to happen at Revolution, I'm going to say needs to, or just after, is Jay White needs to turn heel.
Oh, poor Jay White. He absolutely needs to turn. Give this man something to fucking do, please. He's so talented. And I understand there's Jay White haters. I get it. I like the guy. He's good looking. He's talks great. Like, what? Like, I don't know. He was so great with the Gun Club. They took everything away from Jay White that got him over, right? And some of it you couldn't help. Juice Robinson got hurt. I get it. Like, they took everything away that got him over, and then they've saddled him to Cope like he's a fucking, like, afterthought. Please fucking turn the guy heel and let him get a fucking win over Copeland. Let him beat Copeland's ass for 3 months. That would be an enjoyable thing to watch, quite frankly, and something Cope should do after this program. Like, you want to give back to younger guys? Fucking start there where with the guy you've just fucked over the most recently, please.
It's one of them, because you almost don't want it to, like, be the ending of Revolution, so it's like he doesn't just end up with a non-clean loss. But yeah, he needs to turn. I know there's been some hinting at it. A lot of people picked up on his gear at Grand Slam being similar to his Bullet Club gear, his heel gear. And yeah, let's see. But this is a guy that's supposed to be smart, right? And playing second fiddle to somebody without reward doesn't sound like Jay White to me.
No.
Like, why was it when it came to the match in Australia? It was like, oh, nothing to do with a title shot, nothing to do with a belt. That's what he said he's into. And, yeah, it's an admittance that this face run has failed, which it has. And I don't think that's entirely through fault of his own. I think,
absolutely not.
They never made a reason for him to turn. And therefore, we saw what we saw. But yeah, he just needs to turn. He just needs to be heel. After Revolution, that needs to be it. And yeah, Copeland should put him over.
Let him go feud with you keep trying to move on and I won't let you. Let him go feud with Orange Cassidy for a while. Give him somebody fun to play with, right? Like, let him go do something funky and stop saddling him with these fucking old guys, right? How many times poor Jay White, he had to suffer through Billy fucking Gunn and now he had to suffer through fucking Edge, right? Like, just please give this man something to do that's good.
He needs something, right? You just gotta...
He deserves it.
Get him moving. Get him moving. He'll be fine. A couple other stories as well. So we just touched on Swerve Strickland momentarily, but Swerve Strickland and Ricochet have really kind of come into their own in the last few weeks with Prince Nana. And and it picked a big number in 1834 as well. In that, so two highest segments or two most notable segments ratings wise for Dynamite quarters on Wednesday was the opener because they got a very low lead in. In fact, it's the first time that the total number has been higher than Big Bang Theory. And, and they started out as a high number. So normally when you get that low lead in, especially in the demo, they normally end up picking up in quarter two, and that didn't happen. Was the Swerve Strickland and Ricochet promo with Prince Nana. And this has been kind of something that maybe went under the radar for a few weeks up to their match in Atlanta, but it was really kind of pushed forward now.
It's fucking amazing. That whole segment, like, I'm going to say it. I enjoyed the visuals of the Hangman MJF segment very much. But from from an emotional standpoint, I was absolutely goddamn riveted during that whole Nana Swerve sequence, right? Everything about it was spectacular. Ricochet is unbelievable. Unbelievable. And I, like, props to him for just being willing to look like an absolute dweeb. And, like, you hate his guts. Like, he's such a fucking douchey little dweeb. And, like, the whining, the, like, way he just, like, oh, God, he's brilliant. And Nana being, like, always being the emotional, like, he's able to provide an emotional center point for Swerve, who's very good at doing emotion, but also still kind of has to come across as, like, tough and cool. And so, like, having Nana there to, like, give him that, like, entryway into his deeper feelings. And Nana, who's like, you, like he said in the fucking promo, I've been there for you the entire time. I've suffered. I've never asked you for anything. Fix this. I would fucking die for Prince Nana right now. I was like, I'll run through a fucking wall for this man. Where's Ricochet? I'll, like, go get the coat myself. Like, just fantastic. And, like, such a great, like, and, like, the counterpoint, like, the long-term work with Swerve in terms of, like, I'm going to let myself get distracted by my hatred, which is a thing he's done before, which is the thing, like, goddamn, it's beautiful. Could not be a bigger proponent of Swerve. If Swerve beats Mox for the title, I will be beside myself. Like Swerve just needs to keep on doing what he's doing, and they need to keep highlighting him because the man has never, I don't think there's been a single fucking feud or opportunity that Swerve Strickland has been given or had he has taken advantage of so much stuff, and he has turned shit into gold time and time and time again. Like, he has to be one of the best signings that AEW has ever made. Like, just what a fucking gift that man is from a wrestling standpoint.
They've done some really clever things in terms of pivoting him away from things as well, because
Yep.
he's not always been at the forefront since
Nope.
since All Out. And the way that he controls his character, keeps himself out of things that might be detrimental, it all just kind of works really well, and it keeps him hot with the audience despite things where other things might be lacking. And they're playing very much off this dynamic that with Swerve and Nana, and it'll be really interesting kind of post Revolution and whatever happens, when kind of you can see they've set up Hangman to come back involved,
Yes.
when he went knocking on his door when his for his just needing to see if Swerve was in the dressing room, just having a peek, but that you can feel that that's going to come back into kind of into the forefront. And they set it up with Nana saying, I stood up for you with all these different people, including Hangman. So how is Nana going to feel about that? And I guess one of the questions is the only way to, and I don't like the idea of breaking up Swerve and Nana ever.
No. Go ahead.
Is the only way to turn Swerve heel, if you want somebody to chase him, to sacrifice Prince Nana?
I don't think so. I think that Nana is... I would not have this be a breakup angle for them at all, right? Like, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it now. It's way too early. I wouldn't do it, period, right now. I think this should be something that plays into their eventual breakup, if they have one, right? Like, this should be like a thing that comes up down the line. I do think that you could turn them both heel. I just think I don't see a situation in which breaking them up is going to make anything better. I think you could use Prince Nana in Swerve's heel turn in a way that does not break them up.
Okay, that's interesting.
I think you could, there could be something to that. I don't know. I'm always so reluctant when you have like a fucking gold like this, that, you know what I mean? Like, this isn't one of those types of things like a fucking Billy Gunn and the Acclaimed where you're like, oh, I can see this turning into a disaster. Like, there's nothing bad about this pairing. Like, nothing bad about this pairing.
Yeah, I'd rather they don't go that way. I think that there's other ways, definitely, you can do things, and there's things that you can kind of eradicate in order to, if you did need to turn him heel. But I also don't think he should turn heel right now.
No, I don't think the audience would go for it, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
I think you'd have to work way too hard, and I think it would be similar to what we had with Hangman, where it's like the audience is like, oh, are you turning away from this? Great, thanks, that's awesome. Like, I just think it's too much work.
Yeah, and talking of old Hanger, who has been I was going to say talk of the town, but maybe the post of the town this week. So MJF and Hangman have had kind of a hard deal to kind of get this match on track for Revolution. And you've seen such kind of a long period of time with it. How have you felt their kind of their promos and everything have led to this match and the dynamics?
So here's my take on this. I think it is a basic pro wrestling angle that is executed perfectly. Like, I think it's executed very well. But so far for me, there's nothing that has taken it out of being a basic pro wrestling angle. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think the best feuds and the most emotional feuds often start as basic pro wrestling angles. Like, sometimes it takes more than one pay-per-view cycle to fucking really get going. And so I'm fine with that. Like, I'm very happy to see MJF doing something at least interesting and being like slightly challenged. I'm happy to see, like we talked about on our show when we talked about this, Hangman getting regular mic time and regular TV time. Like, it all works and it all makes sense to me. So from my perspective, the thing's doing well, but I wouldn't exactly call it like it's not the most innovative storytelling that's ever happened in AEW, which is fine. Not everything needs to be. That's not a complaint.
No, I think they've fed into some themes really well. I think the promo avoided some of the kind of the potholes that a lot of us expected that to step into, and it focused on the right things. It focused on the things that we asked it to focus on.
Yes.
MJF's insecurities, Hangman's additional insecurities in different ways. And I think, the attack on Daniels is the idea of, I don't want to deal with you when you kind of are focused, so I'm going to do things to hurt you emotionally rather than to kind of be up in your face. And it's another way of kind of getting to Paige in a different way.
Also, nothing exposes a podcast or more than saying, I don't understand why Hangman cares about Christopher Daniels now when he was beating him up and killing him. And like, do you pay attention? Have you read a book in your life? Like, what is wrong? Like, what, like, how do you not understand this very basic story that they are telling, which is that like Hangman wanted to beat the shit out of Christopher Daniels and was like upset that he could not. And now is like betrayed by the fact that like he ruined that man's life and it haunts him. And it's like, dudes, come on, figure it out. Like, stop being weird about it.
Yeah, and the key promo for that was the week before, where Paige talks, and this is what plays into the tunnel discussion from this week with him going down the face tunnel. But it wasn't an active choice, so he has been actively choosing to be this man because he doesn't want to be the man that he was last year.
Right.
And if that means, you know, the additional violence or anything like that, he's doing that because it just reinforces him. And all of a sudden, that's brought crashing down. First of all, because he finds out the damage that he's done to Chris Daniels. And then because, you know, when this happens here, he's not choosing whether to be a good guy or a bad guy. He's just reacting to a situation.
Right.
And then he naturally goes down the face channel. And it's kind of a nice thing because everyone's like, oh, he's a babyface. And then, no, he's not.
No.
He's not. He's still not there yet. We're still not at that point.
He's not choosing for that yet. Like, that has to be an active choice that he makes. And he's laid the groundwork for it. And it's going to be amazing when it happens. Everybody's going to lose their fucking minds, me included.
But I think, you know, I look at it and say, yeah, we are at the basic start. It reminds me very much of the start of this, you know, and I'm not comparing them in that, but in terms of the way things are constructed to the first part of Swerve and Hangman going into Wrestle Dream.
Yes.
You know, it's a very basic construct. And I think Max's role here isn't to kind of do any more than that as of yet, and we'll see if he can. But his role is to get Hangman over as a babyface, and that's not to say that Hangman can't get himself over, but he has to be fully focused on that. And he's doing all those little tricks. He's playing into it. He's getting him to chant things. You know, the things where he's listing out all his crimes was hilarious. It was just like, yay!
And that's the stuff that MJF does very, very well. Right? Like, he's very good at building his opponent up while not, and you're like not hanging a fucking lampshade on it. Right? He does a very good job at that. But like, this is why, though, like in terms of being a basic wrestling angle that I'm not mad about, it's why right now in this moment, I'm more emotionally invested in Swerve and Ricochet because that's gone like a level further. Right?
Yeah, they're on their second cycle.
Correct. And the beginning of this, like you said, it's similar to some of these. It's very similar in my mind, too, with the beginning of Hangman versus Moxley, right? Which started out very basic, right? And moved into something much better and deeper. Like they'll get there. I'm not worried that they won't. It's just for this, we're still starting up, I guess would be the way I would put it.
Yeah, and it's nice to see Max with so much control.
Yes.
Like there's the odd line, but my God, it's like a different, it's like night and day. It's like his level of investment. You know, you can have, you're 1 star away from a little cup, Max. You give us Revolution and we'll get you a little cup.
I don't know.
I'll even engrave it.
I don't want to see anybody going through an announce table, and I don't want to see any kind of crazy, like, move. Just do a nice match and do it well. That's all.
Well, the thing is, there's a benefit to doing that as well because there's so many plunder matches on this pay-per-view.
Oh my God.
Right. So we've got a steel cage match. We've got a no DQ match. Is it Falls Count Anywhere? Tony and Mariah.
Whatever shit Moxley and Edge are going to fucking do.
Yeah, that's going to have a ton of plunder in it as well.
Be way too long. We know that.
Yeah, Swerve and Ricochet should be more violent than the previous one.
Yes.
Because that's a grudge match. You know, Kenny and Takeshita are going to, Kenny's going to do something stupid. It's Kenny Omega.
Right.
But the idea of having that straight wrestling match in some ways, and that's not to say like you can't do certain things, but avoiding those kind of, you know, gimmicks, if you will, makes much more sense in this case. You know, this is a psychological match, if anything. So I think you can actually stand out in a different way by doing that than what everybody else is going to do.
Yes.
By the end of the night may feel a little bit repetitive if it's not managed properly.
Yeah, don't agent this show in a silo, dudes. Like, you know, think about how you're going to put these things together. And I'm also fascinated by this, right? Because I'm hesitant to believe that Fletcher and Ospreay are going. I'm curious as to how this match is going to go, right? Like, I'm very curious about how Ospreay is going to handle, you know, a cage match in AEW, and if he's going to be able to bring a level of, you know, AEW's had some really good fucking death matches, right? Like, Ospreay's got to have to elevate his game on that a little bit.
it's a weird one because it doesn't feel like it's weird because when they had the feud in the fall, it felt like it would have deserved it then. But everything since has kind of weakened like the emotional resonance of this.
I think they missed their moment with this feud, to be completely honest with you. Like, I think removing Kenny from it has been weird. I think the fact that we haven't seen Fletcher and Davis together since fucking Davis has been coerced into the Callis family is a huge crime. Like, what's going on? Like, come on, guys. Like, I just think that it's lost a little bit of its heat, I guess would be the best way to describe it. And I think splitting up Kenny and Ospreay, you made such a big production about how they're friends, and then now they're not even talking to each other, and that just seems odd, right? Like, I think there's better ways to like have done that than how they've ended up doing it. But
I just don't feel it feels as emotionally charged. And now we're going to a cage, and it's like, why? Why he lost twice,
right?
Like,
and it did at one time feel fucking emotionally charged.
Yeah, so that's going to have been a strange one, but it's one of them. It's like, will it be something on the level of kind of World's End, or will it be more New Beginning 2024 Saga cage match? Which there are people that love it. It's definitely not me. I thought it was a match that never end. It was up there with the Edge Randy Orton. What's Dave call it? The waterboarding.
Yeah, match. I was ready to confess to tortures if they'd ended this match 30 minutes ago.
It very much felt like that. So I guess we'll see what we get out of that. Last bit on Hangman. So my thing on this is, if you just watch this TV, and you probably don't even remember Darby Allin because we chucked him down the stairs and he's kind of out of sight, out of mind. All the talk, every single thing they've done in the last few months, from Chris Daniels first getting involved, was you want your belt back. Basically, you're the main character. You're doing this, and the portrayal worries me if they have any other plans than going that way. It really does, and I wouldn't put him anywhere near Mox. And the idea of Swerve being near Mox and then Hangman is like got my antlers up and, oh my God, are you going to fall into the same trap as last year where your TV suggests that it should be this guy and you try and do something else and people retaliate against it? So my question is to you, have they turned him too early, or are they turning him too early?
I don't know. I think if you look around, like, obviously you have Ospreay, you have Kenny, Orange Cassidy is back, although I think he's been damaged by the last two.
Orange Cassidy came back in a nonsense tournament to get Takeshita a final win on Dynamite because he hasn't had one with the belt.
Yeah, it was there to make Takeshita,
he's now on a pre-show? What the fuck? Sorry.
Right. No, it doesn't make any fucking sense, and I think they'd have been better off holding him until after Revolution. But I know that they clearly wanted to give Takeshita a big win over somebody who's obviously and clearly the best international champion. The Excalibur saying these two men may be the two best international champions. Like, fucking, what is Takeshita? Yeah. What has Takeshita done to make him one of the best international champions? Like, Roddy was better than Takeshita at this. Like, how many fucking defenses is the guy? The guy's done nothing.
Yeah, and that's nothing on Takeshita, by the way.
Nothing on Takeshita ever.
Takeshita's going to go prove himself when he goes to New Japan. He's going to,
look like a million fucking bucks.
We all know how good he is.
Right.
But in AEW, he's done nothing with his belt.
Right. They've not done anything. So that was cut. But they clearly wanted to give him a significant win before Kenny beats him, which fine, I get it. But like, it just is odd to me, and I don't it's fine. I think this is AEW does this thing where they do this meme shit and then they beat it into the fucking ground. See above Billy Gunn, where it's like, you could let some shit go once in a while. Like, the Costco guys were great. They had a great moment before Full Gear. They don't have to come back constantly. We could just say thank you so much and maybe
they're signed.
Right. Oh God!
I think they're signed.
What are you doing?
Like, they're signed because WWE had interest in them. Well, the thing is like the Costco guys are one of these things where I don't know how much it works for wrestling, right? Because they think they get all this engagement. They have this many TikTok and that. Okay, but engagement. How much is engagement worse unless you can create that into loyalty? You can create that into like a customer. To me,
right?
So. Does it increase your visibility? Maybe, but have you already gained that from that? So you had that thing where you appear on their TikTok. That's it. It's that moment's gone. You don't gain anything additional once you've done that. It's a one-hit wonder, essentially.
I would feel like you'd say that Tony could learn from freaking Ricky Saints and say, you can take the L. right? Like, let the guy go. He's going to be better off somewhere else, right? Like, I don't know. I don't get this, but whatever. It'll be a fun, stupid pre-show match that, OC and the MXM and Johnny, they'll all carry it. It'll be fine. But I just feel like, why is this man on television?
It's just a waste. It just feels like a waste of Cassidy coming back. We've taken no narrative out of even, being destroyed by Hangman on the debut.
Right.
And I get it, like, you may have abandoned that because you're now switching him. But, like, there needs to be an emotional reaction. There needs to be something in his character. And we expect that from the Cassidy character.
Right, because he doesn't usually.
Yeah. And
anyway,
instead,
my point to your discussion, which is, do you think they've turned Hangman too early? Is I don't think so. I think that they could use some good some hot baby faces right now. And I think it's going to, again, it's like everything else. It's going to depend on what they do. Right. Mm-hmm. If we have this MJF feud and then you roll him into a mid card thing with like fucking Edge or whoever, like, no, or like fucking Cope or what, or Christian is what I'm thinking of. Like, no, then it's a waste. And then they definitely did it too early. But if they've got something bigger planned or something more interesting, like, I'm here for it. Right. Like, I'm going to wait and see. But it's just, take some. Again, you have some options here. People have been raving about the television for the last month. They've been talking about how great it is. People seem invested again. You've got some secondary engagement on your different platforms with people being excited about what they're seeing. Like, don't fuck it up.
Because my thing of that is like just keeping the fuck away from Jon Moxley if he's not going to be involved in that ending of that. Because if you feed him to Moxley or you put him around there, that's what people are going to want, because that's what happened last year. And it didn't matter last year, it was Bryan Danielson and his retirement tour. Didn't matter, no one gave a fuck. That it still happened. There was still that thing, and it still cost you. So keep him the fuck away. And if you don't, well, you're going to get burnt. And that's where I look at it and think, that's why I wonder if they've turned him too early, because I think if you want to finish with anything else, you're in trouble.
You got to sell tickets for All Out somehow. And I get that people are really optimistic about it, or All In, rather. People are all optimistic about it, but like, you got to fucking...
11. It's at 11K. I mean, you're looking at maximum 20.
Right. Unless you fucking do something, dude.
Yeah, but that's like a reasonable look. You're doing 100 a week. You're not going to increase massively until you start announcing matches. And then the days of anything sparking huge numbers have not really been seen. Max and Cole move very well, but that's a rarity, not a normality. So, if anyone thinks that's going to spark 30, it's not. It's not.
No,
it's not going to spark 30. But you have to be realistic and think, okay, what can we do that will maximize that? And so a couple more AEW. We got some questions. We got a load of questions last minute. So I got a question from Ray. So I know you talked briefly about the AEW women's division, but what do you think is next? Do you think it's down as... do you think the women's division last year was better than the men's division?
Like last year, meaning 23, or last year?
24.
24. Yeah. I think there's probably an argument to be made that at times the women's division was more interesting than the men's division in 2024. I think definitely at the end of it. I think that the problem they're having with the women's division now is the same problem that they have with the men's division. There's a logjam at the top, and they're kind of into Mercedes Moné is kind of turned into Jade Cargill with the rote defenses for there's nothing interesting there. It's just sort of a series of challengers for the TBS title. Right. If she has a long feud with Athena, that could be something. Like, that would be interesting. But I do think there's a point where she's going to need to lose the belt in order to get to a more interesting place. And they just don't have enough TV time to focus. And like you can see, they're doing nothing with Willow Nightingale, right? Who should be one of the anchors of that division, right? The crowd loves her. I think that's a bigger problem for them right now. They don't get enough TV time, and the same people are sort of stuck at the top. So they're not, it's nice to have a different set of problems than like, here's Britt Baker's pay-per-view opponent, and that's all the story that the women have. But it doesn't mean that the division is in fantastic shape.
I think they've kind of caught up in some ways to the men's division in terms of having some stronger stories, but also having some of the similar problems, right? So you have an element where we've had, this current Tony and Mariah program play up over a year and a half, which feels so foreign compared to women's stories in the past, which felt very much thrown together, something to have on a pay-per-view. There was very few that kind of carried for that period of time. Or there hasn't been anything like that period of time. So in that way, this is success. There are elements where they are still not positioned strongly. We are back to Q7 most weeks on Dynamite. And we're seeing kind of a lot of, it is kind of a regression about that. My worry is that at the moment you have the Tony Storm story, and you have the Mercedes Moné story, and then you have very little time for much else. So, and losing Rampage was not great for that.
No.
There was so much women's content on Rampage. So even if you take the belts off Tony and Mercedes, it's probably coming up to when you need to drop that thing. Eventually, coming up potentially probably All In, they'll probably look at that. You need to put someone over. There's been a huge investment in you over the last year. We'll make something out of it. And that's what you do. But do they then still remain the focus of the show? Is he going to elevate other people in those spots, or are you going to fall into the same thing that you have at the men's division with a Jericho or a Moxley or an MJF? You have to balance that as well, and that's probably the big challenge coming up. So, there needs to be, we see kind of little programs underneath, but we also see things that kind of, like we saw with Chris and Willow, where it kind of fleets in and out, and it doesn't really mean anything. And, then we just squander it, and then we come back to it, but we actually haven't really kind of done anything with it. And these characters come in and out and play little bitch roles when they're opposite or adjacent to a Mercedes, a Tony, or whatever. So that's kind of their next step, is how you balance that. Are you actually going to move people up, or is it going to end up with the same kind of status quo that you had in the men's division, which you avoided for so long, mainly because you just didn't have enough, Right. So there was these opportunities for people to move or to do things because there wasn't really anything on top, and there wasn't really anyone kind of coming in that would act in that way. And now there is. So I think that's the big challenge with that. Would I look at it stronger than the men's division last year? No, I don't know. But I think it's very difficult to make that comparison because of, how little time they get in comparison.
Yeah.
So I don't think you can, and even though that time has improved, let's be fair, that time has improved.
Yes.
I don't think that is a difficult thing to say. I think that, there's been plenty of arguments this week about whether Tony and Mariah should main event this pay-per-view, because it's one thing to main event a TV special when it's arguably not really a main event because the opening is a main event.
Right.
But it's another thing to main event a pay-per-view, and this one was the weak kind of in terms of attraction of the male world title match maybe suggested, but then that's also something that could make them vulnerable as well. But you've got to put people in them positions. So I can see the argument for that. I don't think you're ever going to do it. Maybe with Mercedes at one point, but I think it's very difficult to foresee, and there's a lot of other politics kind of involved in that. So, it's a wait and see question, isn't it? So I've made some advancements. It's good to see some kind of more depth storytelling that we've seen in previous years. I don't need kind of women used as a addition to a male story just because in a very WWE way, like we saw this week. I don't need that. But, just focus on what you do right, and then try and figure out how you balance getting them more time, but then also keeping your stars on TV. Last question on AEW. And this is from our friend Doc, sometimes troll, sometimes friend. Hello. The lower ticket prices for AEW is pretty neat. Specifically, floor seats for Revolution are only $150. Has AEW lowering ticket prices led to more seats being sold? Why have both AEW and WWE touted live gates ahead of attendance? Oh boy. So the pay-per-view model works very, very well at the moment. And the ticketing price for the pay-per-view models has got a lot better in general. We saw that started kind of full gear in 2023. Was the first notable of that model changing and being much more affordable. But the big difference with the pay-per-view still is that is the most kind of, what's the word? That's the thing that is the most attractive to AEW ticket buyers. Because you know who you're going to see, you know what you're going to see. There's no kind of understanding of what the product's going to misunderstand what the product's going to be. You know what you're going to get. Right. And the quality of their pay-per-views is always held up. So it's that attraction of what that is that drives the ticket sales. The low pricing helps, and it stops it from being a barrier. I think that's the thing about pricing. So if you get your pricing wrong, it becomes a barrier, and it becomes something that means that you're not going to buy the same tickets next time. And that's what we've seen. And that's why we get lower on sales, and we get lots of chasing at the end. And that's a reflection. That's something we keep an eye on with WWE sales as of late. That's a reflection of actually momentum slowing down. That's why one of the first signs that you see. And then when things pick up, you can pick up prices like WWE have done because demand is bigger. So as much as lower ticket sales means that it can be more accessible, however, you've also got to tell your kind of ticket buying audience that they are lower ticket sales and that you're not going to lower them afterwards come nearer the show. You have to rebuild that trust. It's that trust thing. So lower ticket sales may have ensured kind of more tickets were bought for an individual show. However, there is no evidence in numbers because the numbers are generally based on where the product is. And that's it. So we still got a lot of market to markets. I think the only exception this year was Jacksonville, which is kind of a hard one to measure. And normally I leave off the chart because of the amount of comps for that show. But every other market is still down market to market. You know, maybe they're slowing the rate slightly of decrease, but we're still not seeing positive growth in that way yet. And that's not to say that, you know, they're not, you know, green shoots or things that look positive or things that you can look as an upturn. But in terms of ticket sales, they're not at that position yet. And you won't see that probably for a while at this point. You know, but that will be the first sign of real uptick. You will see it in that, and that's when the lower pricing should kick in as a an extra attraction and increase those numbers. And then once your demand is exceeding that pricing, then you raise them up. But we're still in that bit where it's about regaining trust. So it's not a barrier in the way that it was, but there's also these other incrementals and just, you know, where the product is currently, that means they're still not seeing like an uptake in ticket sales. Live gates instead of attendance. Oh, I hate this so much. I think some of that is started because of UFC in WWE in a way that they talk about it, and that has kind of swept across. In AEW, it became this obsession with the $1 million gate, and that became a way. I think that's become a way to show success even when your general numbers don't look as successful. However, I think it's the wrong way of looking at it. So for something like AEW as an alternative, as you brand yourselves, you know, the best thing they used to say is like, you know, when this comes to an affordable ticketing as well, we had 20,000 in Arthur Ashe. Didn't do $1 million. Could have done $1 million if you priced it that way, but it didn't. But we kept it at a fair price. It had high demand, and we got 20,000 in there. You know, and outside of the UK, that's still, the biggest show that we've ever done. In Australia, you know, where you've had problems with refunds and you've moved venues and that sort of thing, you should be focused on. We've got 11,000 in this building. It's the biggest attendance that we've had that there's ever been for wrestling in Perth. Oh my God, in Brisbane. Too much rugby league this weekend. In Brisbane, and that should have been the focus. So I can see why WWE do it. And, you know, their fan base doesn't seem to have an issue with it, but it's so integrated into what UFC do as well. But the focus should still be on how many people have you brought into the building, and especially for AEW, you know, and maybe that's difficult at the moment where they are, but at Revolution, I don't want to hear about the gate. I don't want to hear anything about the gate. I want to say, you know, we've had this many people in the Staples Center, you know, for this fantastic pay-per-view. Look at the matches we put on, look how great the crowd is engaged. That's it, you know, so I think that, you know, if you want to do that corporately when you're talking on, you know, wherever, fine. But when it comes to talking to your fan base, then that's kind of what you need to focus on. Have you got any thoughts on that one?
No, I don't really want to hear about how much money you've made. I think it's tone deaf, especially now. And I think it doesn't send the right message. And if WWE want to do it, that's fine. It suits their image. It's not a thing that AEW should be focused on, especially not when they're selling out and when they are still having difficulty like filling the buildings for regular TV. Like, don't tell me how much money you fucking made.
And the thing is that like WWE have that twofold. So they have like Stephanie McMahon going out and talking about how much the fans brought this success. They are responsible for it. So they play into it. They weave that story better in a lot of ways. And that's what you've got to do. So if you do want to use the gate, you know, you need to weave that in. You can't just make it as like, oh yeah, look how much money we got out of these people, because that's how it comes across when you get it wrong. So this is a busy week coming up. So we've got Revolution on Sunday. The New Japan Anniversary show is on Tuesday with Goto and Hiroshi Tanahashi. Looks like it's doing a decent number. So the idea of keeping the belt on Goto for a little bit longer, maybe after New Japan Cup, is an interesting one now. And then Stardom have their second no vacancy, super no vacancy. I love that. They have sell out, no vacancy, super no vacancy.
The least amount of vacancy.
The least amount of vacancy. Sell out from Korakuen Hall. That was sold out in I think it was half an hour after the main event were announced, which is a loser leaves the promotion match on Monday morning. Sorry. So that is quite a lot going on this next week. And just to add to that, so we need to do talking about Australia just a second before I talk about something else. We did get some more feedback.
Yeah, we were incredibly lucky. We heard from more people about their experiences at Grand Slam Australia, all of them incredibly detailed, incredibly well written. The amount of time that people took to send us stuff was unbelievably kind, and we're so grateful. Kristen, Chrissy, Jay, and then obviously the people we'd heard from before our last show, Sam D and Sir Sam. So thank you very much for responding to us. Everything you had to say was absolutely freaking brilliant. The comments about, a lot of the stuff was stuff that we had heard about, but the specifics of not being able to rebook the tickets, the complaints specifically in regards to people not being happy with some of the booking choices, people being reluctant to buy tickets because they were concerned that they weren't going to get the early level of promotion suggested that they weren't going to get the kind of care with the card that they thought they might. The people who were there who were non-AEW fans, which I thought was kind of interesting. And just the difficulties with getting to the venue and the logistical challenges. It sort of really underlined for me that in a lot of ways, AEW fans and AEW wrestlers are doing everything they can to bring people in and captivate them, despite the fact that the company sometimes doesn't seem to appreciate the fans that it has, just from a logistical standpoint, or takes them for granted. At a time when I'm like, you shouldn't be fucking taking these people for granted. Stop with the give them merch that they want to buy. They want to give you money. Make it easy for them to give you fucking money. Why is this hard? Stop taking these people for granted. Stop bragging about how big the gates were. And again, we talked about this, that it might have been a promoter rather than AEW with regard to the tickets and the resales of the tickets. Fine. But there certainly were things that were coming out in regard to the communications we were getting from people about just the quality of the promotion for the show, the quality of the wrestlers there, that they were sort of disappointed. And it's dude, your fans want, and every single person was the wrestling was incredible. The wrestlers did such a great job. What a great show, right? Why are you fucking shooting yourself in the foot over and over and over again? Over and over and over again.
There's a great comment I read the other day that was, this is a company with incredible wrestlers that sometimes the promotion gets in the way of.
Yes.
It's fair. But no, we really appreciated the feedback. It gave us a really full picture, especially, when in terms of our discussion on secondary engagement, just everything kind of fit perfectly. So
yes. So
thank you very much.
Kristen, Chris, Jay, thank you so much.
Yeah. So just before we end, I want to put out a firm recommendation for anyone who isn't listening to Tunnel Talk to especially catch the MJF Hangman Swerve and Ricochet segments from the last few weeks. I very much enjoyed them. I sat there as a media essay last week listening to the MJF Hangman promo breakdown. I wanted to take notes.
Yeah, it was really good. Nobody's doing storyline analysis and kayfabe analysis. Everybody's talking about backstage stuff and all this other shit, and but they don't always discuss the character motivations and the stuff. Nobody's doing it like Tunnel Talk, and maybe that's not your cup of tea, and that's fine. But if it is, please listen to them. They are just absolutely incredible, and they're doing a bracketed hot guys of AEW bod what do you call that? Like a whatever. They're doing it. It's fucking great. And it really amused me today. And there were some nail biters in terms of like people who were posed up against themselves. So I'm sort of interested to see how the other bracket goes because we haven't even had some of the tough matchups yet. So
do you mean a tournament?
The tournament. Thank you. What the fuck? God damn. This is my brain not working after like how many hours of podcasting. But yeah, nobody talks about character stuff the way Tunnel Talk does. Nobody, like, you want to talk about like consistent through lines and motivation and all that other stuff. Nobody discusses it the way Tunnel Talk does. And if that's a thing that you're concerned about or you don't think that you're good at, like, listen to fucking them wrestlers. Like, they'll fucking, well, don't, because they'd be really mad about it, but they'd be a lot better.
Are we not in enough trouble for that?
I know, I'm going to get in enough trouble. I'm going to get yelled at so aggressively later. But like, seriously, like, if you're not sure, like, the ideas that these ladies toss off like this, like, I couldn't in a million fucking years. Like, God, they're good. So yeah, again, we will always recommend them, but strong recommend this week.
Absolutely. And our pod is obviously produced by the wonderful Leah from Tunnel Talk. So we are always indebted to Leah. So yes. we do this every week, but we do it for a reason, because otherwise none of this would happen and I am completely useless. On a subject of me being completely useless.
How long do we have, Trish? We've almost gone 2 hours. Oh, I'm getting another look. Sometimes it's good this isn't a video podcast.
Oh, no, yeah, I don't have a face for videos. Someone told me that after the Warren Hayes show. So, yeah, well... Oh, no. So this is just a little thing. So I'm working on something for the Social Suplex Network, which we're looking to launch around the end of March. And I know that we have lots of very talented listeners and people that we interact with. And what I'm basically looking for is anyone that kind of enjoys writing about wrestling. We're looking at a fair rate of compensation for this as well, whether it be anywhere in the world really, and especially my call out here really is to anybody, but especially anyone that's really invested in lucha, because that's something we're missing. Please get in touch. You can do it through all our normal kind of I should just might as well do the close bit here as I'm doing this, might I? Yeah, you can contact us at trishandsarahpod@gmail.com, trishandsarahpod@gmail.com, or at Trish and Sarah on Twitter, any of our handles, or anywhere else. But yeah, if you have anything that you feel like you're passionate about writing about and you want to be part of like a pool of writers on a 2-weekly basis, please get in touch and we'll give you some more information about what this will be in the next few weeks. But we're kind of excited about it. Some great people already helping or volunteering to help do things on it. And let's be disruptive. I like being disruptive. I'm just going to be disruptive. But yeah, and I'm going to say thanks to Tim, who's really helping kind of put something together that should be a worthwhile investment. No paywall. I don't like paywalls. Anyway, but yeah, that will be something coming up project-wise for the Social Suplex in over the next month. So we'll update you on that on our next podcast. Social Suplex is the network that we are a proud member of. We need to come up with a new line other than proud member. It just sounds weird. Like, what do you reckon? I don't know.
I know if you say member too much, it definitely sounds
weird.
Weird.
Yeah, it does, don't it? Right? But no, we are really proud to be part of this network. You can listen to all their great podcasts on your podcast provider or on Red Circle. And you can join our Discord over at socialsuplex.com. Come and talk to us. Come and talk to everybody else. Come and look at the phone picture of Hangman that's been overdoing every social media for a week. Whatever you wish to do. You can also buy merchandise for our entire network and for us over at www.chopped-tees.com/social suplex. I'll be back in 2 weeks. We've got plenty to cover. We're starting the New Japan Cup, the anniversary show, what's going on in Stardom this week with the Loser Leaves Town, essentially. Loser Leaves promotion match, and Revolution pay-per-view kicking in, and whatever the hell happens with this Rock Cena who won't be there story in WWE. So come back then. Until then, I've been Trish.
I've been Sarah.
And this has been a Sarah and Trish wrestling podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are now boarding Group A. Please have your boarding passes ready to scan. If your phone is cracked, old, or was chewed up by your Chihuahua travel companion, please refrain from holding up the line. Instead, go to Verizon and trade in any phone in any condition from one of their top brands for the new Samsung Galaxy S25 Plus with Galaxy AI and a watch and tab on any plan. Only on Verizon.
With new line on my plan. Service plan required for watch and tab. Additional terms apply. See Verizon.com for details.
Taxes was taxing. Now taxes is relaxing when you file for free.
I can file for free? TurboTax Free Edition. Roughly 37% of filers qualify. Simple Form 1040 returns only. See if you qualify at turbotax.com/free. I can file for free.
Now this is taxes. File for free with TurboTax Free Edition and get your maximum refund. No schedules except for Earned Income Tax Credit, Child Tax Credit, and Student Loan Interest. See if you qualify at turbotax.com/free.